Unit 2 economics tax, borrow, spend. By the end, you should be able to criticize government involvement in the economy. Give an example. Supporting evidence should be available for your criticism, or maybe you want to defend it. Either way, examples, evidence. Review. Spending is good. When you spend, production increases. As production increases, more workers are hired. That means more people spending. So you spend. When you buy goods, they have to produce more goods. To produce more goods, more workers are hired. We now have more households working. It means more spending. Yay, yay, yay. Up, up, and up. And you can see over the last 100 years the increase in gross domestic product, or the value of the products that we have made over the last 100 years. We're constantly making and selling more stuff all around the world. When you do not spend, they do not produce. They hire fewer workers or fire workers. Less households are spending, spending goes down, and we have these little dips along the way. As long as they have more ups than little dips, we can increase year after year. The Federal Reserve, in review, the Fed prints the money, loans it to banks. That's how they affect the economy. Through interest rates, they can also adjust banks' requirements, which is the amount of money a bank is required to hold. If a bank has to keep a lot of money in its vault, that means less money in the economy. If they lower that reserve requirement, then the bank can loan out more money. It stimulates the economy in the same way. But for the most part, we talk about interest rates going up or down, and that's how the Fed can control the money supply. The government, they do not print money. That's the Federal Reserve, a quasi-government institution. But the government also can affect the economy. The way that they can make changes to the economy and speed it up or slow it down, stimulate it or stall it, is through taxing, through government spending, and government borrowing. Today we'll talk about those three and how the government affects the economy, as well as how the Federal Reserve we talked about before. Before we start today's lesson, higher level thinkers and all thinkers, a paradox is a statement or concept that contradicts itself. Two things that can't possibly happen at the same time. So in our liar's paradox, the man says, I'm lying. Wait, so you mean you're not lying? Are you lying about lying? How's that? That is a paradox. Today's lesson in government involvement is a paradox. See if you can figure this out before I get to it. Can you spot the paradox? Let's start with taxes. Very simple. If the government raises taxes, they're taxing you. You have less money or fewer dollars in your pocket. And with that being the case, you spend less, the economy shrinks. Taxes go up, economy shrinks. You spend less, production goes down, less workers, then we have even less spending. You know the cycle. What about the opposite? If the government does not tax you, if the government lowers taxes, you know how you now have more money in your pocket. With more money in your pocket, you can spend it. And when you spend, they produce goods and the economy grows. And they hire more workers. And now you have more people spending. And those people are paying low taxes as well. So they spend more, and up and up and up. Let's talk about government spending now. So we talked about taxes. Taxes going up, taxes going down, and how that affects the economy. What about when the government spends money? The government spends money on teachers, puts money in teachers' pockets. The government spends money on building roads. So they put money in construction workers' pockets. They put money in tow truck, dump truck drivers' companies. They put money into asphalt selling companies. The government spends in all sorts of ways, and all that money results in production as well, and in money in people's pockets. The government spends on school lunches. Let's take milk, for example. Every day, they force milk onto the plate everywhere across the schools and country for years and years and years. So when they make it a rule that we have to buy milk, the government is buying milk every day from farmers. So the government is spending on farmers. Farmers spend money to produce their goods. They hire workers. The economy grows. Good stuff. What if the government does not spend? That means the teacher does not have money in his pocket. The farmer does not have money in his pocket. And the economy shrinks. Pretty simple stuff. But there is one problem, high-level thinkers, or all thinkers maybe. Have you figured this one out? So it is bad when taxes are high because less money in your pocket, spending goes down, economy shrinks. But what does the government do with that tax money when they take it from you? Well, they spend it. And they spend it on teachers, they spend it on farmers, they spend it on construction workers building roads, and the economy grows. But if you raise taxes, it's bad. But you have to raise taxes to spend, which is good. How does it work out? Well, let's look at another angle. If they lower taxes, which is good, you got the money, you spend the money, the economy grows. The farmer's paying less in tax dollars, so he decides to expand his farm, hire more workers. Great. But if the government lowers taxes, where do they get money? They don't. So then they spend less. And they don't put the money in the teacher's pocket. They don't put the money in the farmer's pocket. They don't put the money in the road construction worker's pocket, and the economy shrinks. This is the paradox. They can't exist at the same time. You can raise taxes, which is bad, but you get government spending, which is good. Well, which one works out in the end? Or you can lower taxes, which is going to lower spending, which is bad. And this all comes down to the government idea or the belief that maybe they should not get involved in the economy. If it's a paradox and they do one thing, but the trade-off or the consequence is not good, or the cost doesn't work, then why even do it at all? If you want to spend, they got to raise taxes. Does it just neutralize? Does it even out? Maybe they shouldn't tax. Maybe they shouldn't spend. Maybe there should be a free market economy where the government stays out of the economy as much as possible and does not try to affect or influence the economy. Now let's talk last about government borrowing. So we've talked about how taxes can help and hurt the economy and how spending by the government can help and hurt, and how there is a contradiction between taxes and spending. Let's jump into borrowing. The government does not print money. That's the Federal Reserve, a quasi-governmental institute. The government does not print. If they need it, they can tax, but often taxes do not get enough money to pay for all the services that the government has promised, like defending the country with a military. Taxes alone will not cover that bill. Taxes alone will not pay for Medicare or health care for the elderly. Taxes alone will not pay for health care for children in low individual families, Medicaid. Taxes alone probably won't even pay for the school lunches that they provide to low-income families. So where do they get the rest of the money to borrow it? How do they borrow it? Savings bonds. Government can borrow from U.S. citizens, borrow money from China, government borrow money from basically anyone. They borrow just like you, households and firms, borrow from banks. They borrow from banks, they borrow from you. You are the bank when we talk about savings bonds. You are loaning the government money with the promise of gaining interest on that money, just like a bank. Visualize yourself as a little bank, and the government needs to buy school lunches, pay for the next war. You name it, they need cash. The taxes come up short. So you offer them a loan. You give them cash so that they can pay for programs this year. So they can pay police officers, firefighters, teachers, construction crews. They give you in return a savings bond. You wait 10 years. You then cash that bond back in. They pay you your money back plus interest. You're a bank. It's basically like you loan money to someone to build a house. You made them a loan. You loaned it to the government. Good deal. Now, as we talk about government borrowing, one of the best ways is to visualize a giant swimming pool. That giant swimming pool is filled with cash. That is all the money supply of the United States. There is a specific amount of dollars in our economy, period. The Federal Reserve has printed that money out, loaned that money out, and it is out circulating in the economy. Firms can spend it, households can spend it, and the government can spend it. Who is going to spend the finite, specific supply of money? It's not endless. Someone's going to get it, someone's going to spend it. And if the government is borrowing a lot of money, they are sucking up all the money. If the government does not have enough in taxes, if the government is spending too much, then they have to borrow a lot. And if they borrow most of the money, then you do not have access to that money. And if you do not have access to that money because the government is doing all the spending, the government is doing all the borrowing. So if government borrowing goes up, there's less dollars in the swimming pool available to you. That means you spend less, means the economy shrinks. Only so someone gets that amount of money. And if the government gobbles it all up, it's not going to be you. You're not going to spend it. And some would argue that consumers are better at spending and making decisions and backing good companies and productive companies than the government is with spending their money. That the government does not quite have the oversight and spends money and loses money in a very inefficient manner. And often, sometimes when the government spends money, it's in a favoritism type system, which benefits certain political groups, depending on who is in power. Whereas if the money is available for you, the consumer, you make bets in the stock market, or you buy products that are good. You support companies that are productive, like Apple, and those companies take that money and grow their company better. And the economy grows in a more efficient, productive manner year after year. The ultimate idea is that consumers going out fighting and purchasing goods, demanding goods, are better at identifying good productive companies and putting money into efficient parts of the economy rather than the government is at putting money into inefficient parts of the economy. But if the government borrows all the money, they get to decide where the money goes. They get to decide which sectors of the economy are going to flourish. And often, it's not the most productive and the economy shrinks. Another part of this is when the government is borrowing a lot of money and consumer spending goes down. Well, part of that's because they borrowed from you. They borrowed money from you in the form of a savings bond. You don't have that cash anymore. You can't spend. The cash is not in your pocket. You've got a government bond. You can't spend a government bond at the supermarket. Spending goes down. You're not at the store identifying the best products, putting the money into the pockets of the most productive companies that can efficiently grow the economy. You can't play that game. You can't pick the winners. They're picking the winners. And often they don't pick the most productive sectors of the economy. That's what happens when government borrowing goes up. Spending goes down, production goes down, you know the system. Now, what if the government borrows less? Then it's up to you, the consumer, to spend that money. And you, every day, are shopping and buying good products versus bad products. And you buy a bad product, you don't go back to that product anymore. You buy something else. You put the money on Doritos, and Doritos grows. You pick companies that are going to be successful, that are productive, that are efficient, that will stimulate the economy. You and 300 million Americans have a better idea, in theory, of where the money should go by making your purchases day after day and rewarding good companies and punishing bad companies. That's not necessarily how government spending works. When government spends, they just keep spending. It's not a matter of millions of people making transactions, rewarding productivity, rewarding good products versus poor products. Teachers are going to get paid. Construction workers are going to get paid, regardless of how fast the project goes. Teachers get paid almost certainly, regardless of how the tests end up being taken. The teachers get paid year after year. The construction workers get paid year after year, regardless of how good it is. The farmer making milk year after year. They sign a contract. It doesn't matter if the milk is the best milk or the worst milk. Contracts get signed, and the farmer gets paid year after year after year. Does it reward the best farmers? Does it reward the most productive farmers? When the consumer spends and chooses which milk to buy at the store, often we reward the best milk, the cheapest, most affordable milk, the most productive milk company. Not necessarily the way that works when the government spends. So a lot of people favor the idea of having the government borrow less money and allowing consumers to spend more to grow the economy. You got the money, you spend it. Economy goes up. Oh, you can guess what's ready to happen. So when government borrowing goes up, consumer spending goes down, less money in that swimming pool for you, economy shrinks. But technically, and it may not be the most efficient use, but now the government can spend if they borrow, and if they do spend, they're spending on us. They're spending on teachers, construction workers, farmers, policemen, firefighters. and the economy grows. So is it the most efficient, the best way? It's up for you to decide, but we do know that there is an inherent paradox once again. Borrowing's bad, but government spending can work. And you can obviously do the other. If the government stops borrowing, oh, that's good. But then they can't spend. Oh, that's bad. This is why we have the argument for a free market economy. You're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. There are trade-offs. There are no solutions. Oh, we're doing that again, huh? There are no solutions. There are only trade-offs. There are costs to every benefit. What cost are you willing to pay? What cost are you willing to accept? What consequences are you willing to deal with? And since we're in that situation, sometimes it's best to just let the government not get involved at all. If the government can't really help without causing some pain, then maybe they should just try to do as less as possible. There it is. Can you criticize the government getting involved? Do you understand the paradox that when they do affect the economy through taxes, borrowing, and spending, how they can help, but also still hurt at the same time, and they possibly negate each other or equalize to the point of why are you doing anything at all? We're not saying that the government should be completely out, but maybe a little less involved. Or maybe you think, no, I think the government can spend wisely. I do believe that the government can tax and borrow and put money into right parts of the sector of the economy, and that you do need, at the end of the day, the government to direct some funds to specific parts of the economy that otherwise would not be serviced if they're completely hands off.